not pack my lunch today, so I need pizza now.
I packed my lunch today, so I got pizza and a sandwich.
I had donuts.
Donuts are awesome.
It's like, I was getting out of work, and I was just like, what kind of donut should I
Oh, he has a microphone. How come I wasn't told we had a microphone? God damn.
We have like 2 microphones.
I thought we didn't have them for this. There's a plug here. I could have jacked into that audio.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
How you doing?
Ahoy.
Good. Well, welcome to our general meeting. Excited to have you. This is actually our first workshop of the semester, so we're really excited. So we're going to go through a few announcements first, and then we'll get right into the meat of it. All right, first up, so we're using Slideable. We've used this at the past general meeting and maybe the one before that. And so essentially what this is kind of like a Q&A forum that's online. So if you're at home and you're streaming, or if you just want to ask the questions but you don't want to raise your hand or something like that in the middle of the session, you can go to slido.com, or actually sli.do, and then enter in the room code Kotlin, and enter in your questions there. And at some point, probably towards the end of the session, we'll have those questions answered. Also, if you have not paid member dues and you would like to become a full-fledged member, there's 2 ways you can pay your dues. Go online to acm-utsa.org/join, or just scan that QR code right there and that'll take you to the website. Or if you want to pay in cash, you can reach out to Lauren Dill. She's in the back right there. She's waving. So yeah. And Slack. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of you guys are already familiar with this, but if this is one of your first meetings, maybe you're not. So Slack is our main communication channel. So this is the way that we do all of our announcements and anything that you need to know about ACM. So there's a few ways to join our workspace. So if you pay your dues online, you're automatically going to get an invite. If you pay your dues in cash, we'll make sure to personally send you an email. And if you just like to kind of just like poke around and see what's going on in our site workspace and you're not a member, you can just ask an officer and we'll add you into our Slack channel. Speaking of Slack, we have a few opportunities channels that are pretty cool. So hackathons, careers, and opportunities. If you're not already subscribed to these 3 channels, I would definitely recommend it. We'll post some specific information about like different things that are going on either on campus or just around Texas or just things that you just might be interested in. So make sure that you're following those. And we have our social media, YouTube, so there's some people that are currently streaming right now. If you want to check out this session at a later date or something like that, you can go to our YouTube channel and check out any of our historical videos. We have our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and also our LinkedIn. So if you're on LinkedIn and you want to hook up with us, just follow us. And our loyalty program. Who's familiar with the loyalty program at this point? A few hands. Okay. Did anybody participate in the loyalty program last semester? Fewer hands. Okay. So our loyalty program is essentially a way, if you're a member, you're going to be able to accumulate points and get some pretty cool stuff at the end of the semester. So for every ACM or ACMW general meeting that you attend, you'll get 1 point. And if you go to a large event like Rowdy Hacks or something else that we announce as a major event, you'll get 2 points. All that said, if you get 20 points by the end of the semester, you'll either A, if you're going to be returning next semester, you'll get your member fee waived for next semester, so you won't have to pay again. And if you are a graduating senior, you'll actually get an ACM stole, so that kind of like cool ribbon thing that you can wear for graduation. And shirts, if you haven't picked up your shirt, we have them in the back. Just wait until the end of the meeting and then make sure that you let an officer know, like, hey, I still haven't got my shirt, and we'll hook you up. All right, some upcoming events. First off, ACMW is having a general meeting tomorrow with City. That's going to be at 1 p.m., so same time as today, but it's going to be over in SU Willow. And if you're not familiar with that area, if you've been to the Rotama before, it's the one that's immediately to the right if you're facing Rotama. Rowdy Creators meets Fridays at 10 a.m. This week it's going to be in Hidalgo, so if you want to go check out this meeting, make sure that you're paying attention to Hidalgo Room.
1 second. Trent?
We have a Slido question.
Sure.
How do you join the different channels inside of our Slack?
Great question. So if you are in Slack, either on the mobile or the desktop version, if you go to the far left where you can see all the different channels that you're already subscribed to, i.e. like all member or announcements, something like that, there should be a plus button right next to the channel where you can go ahead and just add one of those.
We might need to change the settings. Okay. So imagine we should do that like right under some.
For mobile, there's no plus button, so you would just press a word channels, and it should load up all the different channels.
Just because I realize I can't see really. So
All right, ready
No,
for
you're
yours?
right.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking about
So
that.
they'll dog go. ICBC meets on Saturdays at 10 a.m. That is in NTP 4.140, also known as the activity room. And we also have an Underclassmen Workshop. So if you're a freshman or a sophomore, just somebody that's new to CS and you kind of want to learn a little bit more about coding, these are great things to go to. This one's going to be focusing on setting up your code environment. So if you're starting to get familiar with things like IDEs and stuff like that, but you don't really know how to get started with the actual coding, this is a great session to go to because we're going to get you set up there. Anyway, it's going to be on Monday at 1 p.m. also in the activity room, 4.140 in the NPP, and I highly encourage you guys to check that out. And then next week, same time, but different location, we're going to have our general meeting with Paycom. And so that's going to be in the Harris room, Wednesday at 1 p.m., and they're going to do web application security. And then last one, we have lots of meetings these next 2 weeks, so pretty exciting. We have a tech talk with NSA, and they're going to be talking about Ghidra. If you're into like any cyber or anything like that, you want to learn a little bit more, this is definitely a really cool tech talk that you're going to want to check out. This is going to be Thursday at 5:30 p.m. So if you are streaming right now and you're not able to make it to our meetings at our general time, this might be a good opportunity for you to still come and participate in our meetings. Yeah.
What exactly is Ghidra?
I don't know.
So Ghidra is their open source software reverse engineering tool, and that they'll be presenting on just how it works, I guess like what ways it can be used and like how you can use it for like to just like learn how to do some reverse engineering.
Got a question back here?
Yeah.
More of a statement. One of the things that helps with is it helps to read assembly and C code. So like it'll do the translation for you.
Cool. So the our audience said that it helps to do assembly and C code. Translated, what'd you say?
So like you give it an assembly code and it'll give a rough translation in C code.
Cool. So if you give it an assembly code, it'll do a rough translation into C code. So cool stuff. Anything else? And Grace Hopper celebration. So we've been posting this quite a bit. We've also added some new opportunities into the opportunities channel into Slack. So if you've already kind of like looked at this, but you want to see some of like the individual scholarships that have been posted, go check out that in the opportunities channel. And Rowdy Hacks. So that's coming up March 28th and 29th. It's here at UCSA main campus at the HU Ballroom. It is 100% free. One question that I feel like Rowdy Hacks gets a lot is, well, I'm not really that great at coding. I don't know if I should be attending or not, should I? And the answer is a resounding yes. Whatever skill level you are, if you're like a seasoned coder or if it's like your first time programming ever, this is still the event for you. So definitely check it out. Anyways, applications are now open on rowdyhacks.io, so make sure that you're filling that out. I would also recommend, even if you're not totally sure if you're going to be able to make the event, I would still register just so you can claim a spot. And then also, social media is at rowdyhacks. Yes.
Are y'all gonna make any shirts?
Definitely. So yeah, if you're hacking or if you want to volunteer or something like that, you'll definitely get a shirt. More things about the event. I mean, like if you go to the event, you'll get like food, different prizes, and swag, and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, definitely check it out. And that is it for our announcements. So let's go ahead and get to the beat of today's meeting. So understanding Kotlin.
Alright, just give me 1 second. I need to fix a little clerical error and I saw the center of my screen. So bear with us for 1 moment.
So I'll just start off with a question. How many of you have heard of Kotlin? Okay, pretty good amount. And I guess like, what have you seen Kotlin used for mainly? Just like, as like the main tool of something. I guess like, what have you seen Kotlin used for? Just like, any hands or? Yeah. Yeah. So that's a very common use for Kotlin. In fact, on top of using and doing Kotlin for Android development, it has actually expanded to just like cross-platform development. And I want to get into talking a little bit more about Kotlin and some of its history. So Kotlin's history It was made by JetBrains. If you don't know who like JetBrains is the creator of like Sea Lion, IntelliJ, IDEA, all of those like IDEs. And originally they wanted a very concise language that still had like strong typing and was very concise. So they started building Kotlin in 2011, and by the time 2017 came around, it became an official alternative to Android, or for the Android development. At the time, Java was the main language, but now, I guess like starting in 2019, it became the preferred language for Android development. Sorry, we're trying to see if we can do screen sharing on our stream. Alright, so what is Kotlin? So Kotlin is an interpreted language similar to Python. So Python it looks very similar to Python. It's different in some ways, but for the most part, it looks very similar to it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Java if you took a step to Python.
And it's mainly built on top of the JVM. So if you don't know what this is, it's the Java virtual machine, and it's basically what all your Java code runs on, and that's what makes it platform independent, because JVM is its own set of way to keep track of just how memory works for the program. The syntax is very concise. We'll get to how it looks a lot more concise. And there's static typing and it's strongly typed. So some of the competitors for Kotlin include Swift, Java, Xamarin, Flutter, React Native, Ionic. So how many of you guys have heard of all of these? A couple. So I'll just go into what makes these like strong competitors. So Swift is the main development for iOS, and it's built on top of Objective-C, but it makes it look very similar to Kotlin in some aspects. And it's heavily supported by Apple themselves, and so that's why it's the preferred language for iOS development. Java was the original contender for Android development, and so that's also why it's a competitor in a sense. And Xamarin, Flutter, React Native, and Ionic are all 4 different ways of doing cross-platform mobile development. And Xamarin is created by Microsoft, Flutter is created by Google, React Native is created by Facebook, and Ionic is open source, which is built on top of Angular. So they're all different ways of how to create like mobile development for both iOS and Android, and maybe even web a little bit. But for the most part, they're targeting both iOS and Android. So why Kotlin, even over all of these? So it's cross-platform, so it's immediately better than Swift and Java. It compiles down to a native language. So that's very powerful in the sense that not every single language can compile, or not every single framework can compile down to a native language. So Xamarin, Flutter, Ionic, and last one's blanking. But the language itself is very concise, very easy to learn, and very strong type checking. So we want to start off this workshop by just getting ready to start setting up the code environment. So I'll let Russell talk about this.
All right, so I'm going to take over now. So Liam may interrupt me if I make a fantastical mistake. Anywho, we're mostly going to be using IntelliJ today, but Android Studio is also pretty sweet. It's actually built on IntelliJ, and it has a pretty cool, I think it's called ABGs, which are, they kind of simulate the Android environment, and it'll actually like pop up with a little, almost like phone. You can say, oh, I want to use a Nexus, and it'll actually come up with the right pixels, so you can develop for like a Nexus, or even a Pixel. But we're going to use IntelliJ just because we're going to show some like pretty quick coding examples. You know, of different things in Kotlin, various types, and go through like what makes Kotlin Kotlin, and show examples of conciseness and other things like that. We cloned the repo, basically everything I worked on here, which I'm going to add more to later. The main thing we're missing is strings, but we pretty much have everything else that makes Kotlin unique. So if y'all have IntelliJ, you can open up IntelliJ, and you should just be able to start a Kotlin file, and you should be able to right-click on your source when it comes to that. Yeah, I can just show it. Yeah, so here is, you know, a little demo thing we had. So you'll start off, and you won't have all these source files, obviously. But if you just come over here to your source, or maybe let me go one step back, actually. Yeah, let me start a new project. So here we go, we're back to your IntelliJ. So we're going to create a new project. And we're going to come down here to Kotlin. And we're going to go over to our JVM. So that's what it's built on, our Java virtual machine. And we're just going to say finish. And we're going to need something. Instead of demo, let's go live demo. And hopefully, we don't mess it up. So here we are. We have our live demo. And we have our things here. And you know, it looks a little similar to Java, but it's mostly its own. It really just has one source file. So, you know. Am I going a little too fast? Or does anybody want me to slow down? Or does anybody have any questions yet? I should say before I carry on too fast. Any questions from the stream yet? Okay, good to go then. All right, so you're going to come over here, and you can just right-click, go to New, create a new Kotlin file. So what are we going to name it? I'm just going to name this one, no, Hello World. We're going to start real simple. So, functions in Kotlin are pretty simple. They start with fun, really. It's going to be great fun, wow. You know, give it a title. This is all going to look pretty similar to you guys. You know, you got to give it your parentheses to do your parameters. You know, give it some brackets, and then it's as simple in Kotlin as just going print line. This is all going to look very familiar right now, and saying hello world. Boom. And kind of a fun thing with Kotlin is semicolons are completely optional. So, where's my little run icon? Hello. It should be right there, unless I'm missing something. Yeah, maybe I have to do a lowercase down, maybe it doesn't like that. Normally it pops up over here and have a little run thing. Let me see, let me go back to our slide. So, oh, this is our repository. We did put it on the Slack, if anybody wants to pull it right now, or you can just go along as we go. So it's here, but like I said, it's also on the Slack, so you can grab it. Yes?
Are there any like classes, and if so, do file names need to match the class name like in Java?
So the file name is best class name. There are classes, and you can set it up, so it does have like object-oriented typing. But I'd say yeah, it's mostly similar to like Java classes if you did that. Yeah, you got yours.
You don't have to have everything in a class like Java, so you can actually create functions on their own and it's still be valid.
That is the real question. Here. Let me go back to here real quick just to double check. I'm not missing something critical. No, it's the same thing. Yeah, it doesn't like me. Well, this is exactly what we wrote, so I'll show you right here. Ideally, you just do this, and IntelliJ has this nice little button over here. You can play it, you can run it, and your little console should show up here and show you were successful. Oh, no, it's going to complain at me for other things. Because I had some examples of non-running code and running code, so run hello world, please. It's not gonna like. Let me just note this out real quick. Will you allow me to show people stuff now? Our lovely members of ACM. Oh boy. Let's go back to, let's see if we can get it to start off. This is why they say never do coding live. Because you're always now, oh, there it is. Now, oh, and there it is. It's playing with me. Finish. And there we go. Hey, it worked. A simple hello world. So this is pretty simple. Should be, mostly recognizable to most people. Kind of nice thing about Kotlin is it's, like I said, it's similar to Java, except it has a lot of things interpreted. So it's also very similar to Python. So a lot of what you'll see is you kind of take the idea of saying, oh, if you're used to Java or you've seen Java before, there's a lot of tutorials and guides for Java. And you'll learn an apps program if you haven't played it yet. Like really learn it. But you don't have to give it a lot of types. So we got our hello world here, but if we were to say, oh, let's give a val of x, and we're just going to say, we're going to just let it equal 5, right? It knows how to interpret that, so we can implicitly give it a type. Oh, after the x, that's right. Okay, so we can implicitly give it a type. Explicitly, sorry, not implicitly. Explicitly give it a type. And it should print
Just leave that to the side.
x. Yes,
The
please.
bar keeps coming up at the bottom, so you find that for
Like that. Boom. Okay, we're gonna run that again. Just show you guys.
There's a little bar that keeps coming up at the bottom. So like the street, but it goes away.
And there we go. So that would be like a standard variable declaration. But like I said, Kotlin is interpretive. So this should also work equally as well, just saying x equals 5, boom, we're good. And voila, nothing has changed. Hello. That's useful in some cases and not any other. It works with pretty much everything, so like it'll work with that, you can do it for a string, and this should work, no problem. And you can do it for anything. So you can either explicitly give it a declaration of a type, or you can just say, hey, I just want to get some stuff out, I want to get some code out. Boom, ACM. Yeah. Back to the slide?
Yeah.
Okay. I should
So, in order to like fully understand Kotlin, we'll go into some of the more in-depth core concepts of Kotlin. And one of the big ones starts with immutable versus immutable variables. And so Kotlin has immutable variables and mutable variables. Like in Java, you only see mutable variables. I guess there are, I didn't realize that you could do it, but I just remembered. But you could do like final int x in Java, which is not as nice as doing val. So there's val, and then there's var. So var lets you mutably change your variables, and val is immutable by default. So sometimes you want to do vals more often, just because you don't want to be constantly changing your variables. It's built that way so that it's easier to make sure that something's not incorrect at that point. Here's some other ones. So nullable variables. In Java, everything is nullable, so they can be null. So string temp equals null in Java means it's possible. While in Kotlin, it must have like a question mark after the type to make it nullable. So compiles, so the top one compiles with the question mark, and the bottom one does not compile without the question mark. This is like a crucial thing in understanding how Kotlin works, because we'll be using this a lot later in terms of how we can do a lot of chaining.
So it's kind of like, it's almost like user manually defined. So if you're writing code and you know that this variable is never going to be null, like never, 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 it's never going to be null, that's when you use without the nullable type. So the question mark, when you attach it to a type, turns it into a nullable variable. So there's actually like 2 variables for every one type. So there's nullable and non-nullable strings, there's nullable and non-nullable integers. So in the case of when you're using something that's non-nullable, you're basically saying this will never be null. And that's why it's not let it compile as null, is because in Kotlin it's understood that when you use a non-nullable type, it cannot be null and should not ever be null. And you could write your code assuming that, meaning you can do things like you never have to check for null, you could just assume something's always going to be there. On the other hand though, if you make something a nullable type, it not only allows it to compile as null, but you can write your code with the knowledge that it may very well be null, and you can check it. And there's a lot of like little handy things you can do now that you know things can be null or not null that Kotlin lets you do in regards to like replacing values without having to try and catch block a lot of things, which it does exist in Kotlin, but there's a lot of better ways to handle something than just a lot of try catches. Oh, I can show some of the stuff in regards to the nullable type. Yeah, we'll just go back and forth. So this will be easier to show on the one I already have. Where's my immutable variables? So this is more immutable variables, which we went over. Like I said, we kind of did a live demo of, here's an explicit definition. Here's one that's inferred. You can split it. This Leo line's just saying, oh, you could just straight up declare it, seeing as you say it anyways. But for example, this is that. The difference between, I believe the difference between a val and a var is vals can only be written to once. Remember right?
Yeah.
Would actually complain at you saying, oh, would you like to make this a var? So that's kind of the difference between vals and vars. They both work like, so we have a var of x here, so x equals 5, and we can do plus equals 1. There's also the use of where, this is a simple way to use it inside print lines. Y equals your variable y in this case, which is actually down here, which is an example of top-level variable use. So you can actually throw variables in between your functions. Sort of, kind of, I wouldn't quite say globals, but they can exist outside of functions. Okay? And then you could use them both in this little function here, which just increments y, so we'll take y0 and increment it up. And if I play it, which it won't let me because there's other errors here, yes, apparently. But it will show that y0 here, and pi equals 3.14, and then it'll increment it, and then it'll show it as 1. So you can actually have variables that exist outside of your functions that carry through things. And then we have the nullable types, right? Okay. So with nullable types, here's an example of code that will not compile. What we said before is we named this variable a with a string of ACM, and then we set it to null. This will not compile because now we did not give it a nullable type. However, we take the variable b here, we give the string a nullable type marking, and then cast ACM, and then we can set it to null, and it'll be okay. And then b, I believe, either prints empty or it actually prints nothing. I gotta double check that one when you set something to null in Kotlin. Here's an example of where you can actually take your call to A since you know that it cannot be null, it will allow you to just straight up send it as a string into a value. And since it's interpreted, you don't need to give it an integer or anything. It's just boom, there you go, it works. However, because B is a nullable type, it will actually give you an error that it cannot do this. So that's kind of an advantage of nullable and non-nullable types, is it makes it clear in the coding whether something can or cannot be used in these ways. Yes. Oh, the link's broken? Okay. Okay. Thank you. To simply sum it up, if something potentially is going to be null, or you want to give something null for now, let's say you're going to because Java will kind of complain at you if you give a string a null type or an array a null type. But the nice thing in Kotlin is you can give a string a nullable type and then fill it in later once you have the info for that. So if you're going to like set some stuff up and then initialize like a file or a buffer or something like that, you can just set it to null ahead of time and then later on take it. So it can kind of clean up your code. It makes it a little easier to understand, or you can kind of do things more how you want because you can set things as nullable or not nullable. Huh? Yeah, we can try running it. Or comment that out. Because that will not run.
Got a question back here.
Yeah.
So when you're doing the print line and you want to input a variable value, all you have to do is include a $sign and then the variable name to.
Oh, yes. Yes, I should have said that. If you want to include a variable or actually functions, which I'll show a little bit later, you include a $sign in front of it. And that's kind of your escape character, is that the right term? It just marks it as this is a variable to use. Similar to how you use a percent in C, if I remember right. Yeah. It's exactly the same as that. You just use the $sign instead. Is there anything else on the questions so far? Mainly, I put examples in here of non-compilable and compilable code. So now that we're trying to run it, I guess it's not letting me run it on a file-by-file basis. It's giving me errors, so unfortunately I can't show this.
Can you do Control-Shift F10?
Control-Shift F10. Yeah, you might need 2 hands for that. Yeah, go ahead. Control-Shift F10 is what you're pressing.
According to Stack Overflow.
Okay. Yeah, it's because I don't have Leon as a declared type, because I want to show a fancy little thing I found. That's fine, go to Guardi now. Well, what's the next subject so we can start talking about that? Yes. I need to do.
So, next one is going to be about Guardi. So now that we know the difference between a nullable type and a non-nullable type, we can do something called Guardi. So this lets us check if it's a null type before you can do any methods with it. And so what we can do is we can use the question mark to do like a so I put some comparisons between a Kotlin file versus, or a Kotlin command versus Java program. So like in order to get the index of like ACM, even though both strings are null, you would have to do a null check in Java, or you can just do a question mark in Kotlin. So that's the simple technique of Guardi.
Okay. So here's some more Guardi examples. This is what you saw previously, where you can just give it a null type, equal to null, and then set it to ACM and do your index of it. Some other, well, we saw this one before, but we're going to use this one. So where this actually allows you to compile, where if you set your string to a nullable type, give it to an ACM, and even if you give it a null later on, it will still, I didn't fix that. It will give you an error here, mainly because B can be null. So that's an example of like where it won't work. However, you can do some pretty fancy checks where if you say, okay, let's just take this variable n, and this is an example of conciseness. You can make this look like a standard if statement in Java. However, Kotlin allows you to be very concise with things. So you can say, okay, if A is not equal to null, in this case, which is just a standard, explicit check to see if A is null. But you can say if it's not null, then get the length, elsewise return a -1. And just as simple as that. Like I said, you could extrapolate it out and make it look like a Java if statement or if else statement, but in Kotlin, as long as it's explicit declarations, you can actually just make it really shorthand like this, because if statements are actually treated as expressions. So I read this was very technical, but they actually return a value, so you can have them equate to something. They don't just have to exist in their own blocks as an if statement, which is actually really powerful. But equally so, you can just have them act as a standard like if-else block for flow control. And so here is an example of like a string. So we have rowdy hacks. So we use a similar thing. So in this case, we're using kind of print statements, so we have to kind of use an if-else. But in this case, we can say, okay, well, if it's not null, because we said it's a nullable type, and or we can also check its length. If C's length is greater than 0, it means it's also good. We print the length of this. So this will print the string length of rowdy hacks is 5 to 10 characters. Elsewise, just print an empty string if it's null. So pretty easy stuff. We can do that. Another way is to do safe, what they call safe calls. And that's using a question mark dot. Kind of how in Java, how you can like chain calls together for dot, like so dot this, dot this, going down the line. You can do things like that. Where we have an example of rowdy hacks, so just use this example again. Make a string E, it's a nullable type, make it equal to null. D is technically a necessary safe call, but you can do it just to make sure, because it's implied that it's just a string without nullable. However, the way you do a safe call in this case for E is with the question mark dot. So it's called the safe call operator, the question mark dot. So in this case with E, even though it's nullable, it's kind of like a safety call to it. If it's not null, then it will, but if it's null otherwise, I believe it just returns int question mark, actually a nullable int, which is kind of interesting because length is a means type function. And then this is an example before where it's an example of chain calls. So if you have something where you have a lot of objects and there's things in objects, you can say, okay, I want to take Leon and I want to find out like, okay, Leon is the chair of so-and-so, right? Whatever position he is. And then I want to find out his president's name, or his president's position, and then find the name of that president, i.e. Matt, who I think is gone now, but hey. But that's an example of that. And the nice thing about this is that it will allow you to run this. It's only giving me an error now because I don't have a Leon object here, just for shorthand. But if you did have a Leon object, and it had all this information in it, if any one of these parts is null, it'll return it as null and not just give you a null, we call pointer exception, like it would in Java. So it's really handy, instead of having to check each one of these things, oh, does Leon exist, does Leon's chair exist, does Leon's chair's president exist, does that president have a name? If any one of those are null, it will just return as null instead of actually giving you like a full null pointer exception. So in this case, it's kind of like saying, if Leon may exist, and his chair, who's his chair who may exist, and who's the president of that chair who may exist, and what is their name, in a way. So it's pretty powerful. So you don't have to check each individual thing. You just go boom, it checks it all right there. And you can kind of check for non-null values in lists. So you can take a list of rowdy hacks, set it null. You can say items within this list, and you can basically ignore nulls. So if this list had nulls in between it, let's just say it's a list or an array, this with arrays too, and you want to go through it, and you just want to print the items in the list that are not null, this is a way to do it. You give the item a nullable type, and you just say let it do this, and then you can say print with it. It is a Kotlin thing, where because it's, what's the term? Inverted? Like Python? Because it's inferred, it is a definition in Kotlin that refers to like kind of what you're working on explicitly. So in this case, it is referring to item, or the item null specifically. So what it's going to do is it'll allow it to print rowdy hacks, and it will automatically ignore any null characters or values in that list. Like I said, it work with arrays, it should work with any really typed collection. It should work for that. This is just an example of lists. But in a similar way, so you can let it. I believe that's what also you call a guard let. So that's pretty cool. And you can do other things like this is kind of a class has exception. So you can kind of say, you can cast an A for like an integer nullable as a int or as a nullable int. So you can kind of cast one as the other in certain situations. And then you could just filter for not nulls as well, similar to the other list. It's kind of the inverse. So you'd say you make a nullable list with a bunch of nulls, and then you can filter out not nulls. It's similar to this, but this is just showing with let specifically. Okay, then we'll speak through it.
So, just because we're kind of running out of time, we'll just speak through all the other core concepts. So there's the Elvis operator, which is basically a way to use your Guardi to return some value to you. So what you can do is, so we have like a null value, and then if it fails to meet the null condition, it'll just become -1. And then here's a similar code in Java, which is which requires you to do the null if statement to else.
So what we'll do is we'll skip through this PowerPoint, and if there's any specific topic you guys want to hear about or see about, you can ask me to show it. Otherwise, I'll just show stuff with the remaining time. All you guys have questions to ask, all right?
Okay, and then there's a not null assertion operator, which is basically if something is null, it'll return a null pointer exception. So how Java would do it would be throw new null pointer exception. So this is if you want to purposely try to catch the exception. Might be useful, might not be useful. Really depends on your circumstances. And Guardlet.
Yes.
If a safe cast uses as question mark, well, then what does a non-safe cast look like?
It would just be an as.
It would just basically be without the question mark.
Yeah.
The question mark implies that this type may be null. So think about it that way. Without a question mark, it will never be null. It should be understood within Kotlin. Kotlin understands it that way, and as a programmer, when you're programming in Kotlin, that's kind of how you have to change your thinking a little bit, is where in every other language, you could be, this could be null at any time, right? In Kotlin specifically, if it does not have a nullable type associated with it, it should never be null, and you can treat it as such. It is kind of a trust system, but like as you become proficient with Kotlin, you understand like it should be this way. So a non-safe cast would simply just be without the question mark. It would still have the dot, so it would still reference stuff.
So Guardlet, so he showed this a little earlier. It basically lets you go through a line of code, or like multiple lines of code, a whole block even. So in comparison to how Java would do it, it's just null check prior to it. It's just to prevent like bloatedness of however many null checks you need. Okay. So there's some ranges in Kotlin. So like, for example, I in 1.10 print I versus the for loop. So basically it's very similar to ranges in Python. There's some more unique aspects to it compared to Python, but for the most part, it's very similar to that aspect.
And this is an example of a Kotlin conciseness compared to Java, where you don't have to put brackets around this for, and you can kind of just put just afterwards, and Kotlin understands that that is what is running inside the for. So that's an example of Kotlin conciseness.
Various steps.
Yes, I have an example of that. We can show it after we run through this, just so people have any questions. But remind me, and I will show you. You can step through multiple different ways.
Yeah, so how you would just do steps is just you would put step and then the number you would be stepping.
But I will show you, so remind me, keep it in head.
And then strings, so how you can access strings using variables. He showed this a little earlier, but you would just use the $sign with the variable name, and then it'll end up becoming all the variables added together, rather than like concatenation in Java.
Yeah, it works more on a literal basis more than concatenation.
Okay, so now I kind of wanted to talk about Android paradigms, because we've been only really talking about Kotlin itself. So let's just go ahead and get started. So in Android, the main paradigm is MVVM. So how many of you have heard of MVC? So MVC stands for Model View Controller, right? MVVM stands for Model View Model, where the model and the views still do the same thing, but your view models are slightly different from your controllers. So in MVC, your controllers have a lot more interaction between what's controlling your models, your backend, and your front-end side of things. View models are solely there just to bind information to the model itself. And so what this does is it kind of limits out how much that middle layer can do for you. Because sometimes your controllers end up getting too bloated because of it's trying to handle everything. Not just, not just your simple interaction between the user and the models. Your controllers end up doing a lot more work than it's supposed to because of that paradigm.
And it's kind of in the way like apps work, how when you open an app, normally it has like a solid toolbar with like a settings tab or like a menu tab, and that normally remains persistent the whole time of the app. So it allows you to control the differences between what's on the actual displays part and then what's in the toolbar, and so it allows it to keep both of those kind of like working at the same time. That's kind of in a way why they split it. So it allows it to work on both.
So because the models and views are pretty similar to, I guess like when we did FXML and like Java in applications, I was gonna not really talk about those. They're basically focused more on like, I guess like in Android it's now XML instead of FXML, but a lot of it can be done through like a GUI, which makes it a lot easier. And then I'll talk about the view model itself. So activities in Android are pretty much the view models, and they basically bind any changes to the user interface to the models itself, and it also handles that user interaction. And then services are things that run in the background, typical to like your web service, things like that. They run in the background so that things can come up when they need to be. They can be bound onto certain calls, and usually these are used when there's not much user interaction, and it's just like communicating with like more of like another service itself, or just like another app, something like that. Content providers, they supply data from one application to another. They're mainly used for like resolving data issues between like the database and the actual application itself. And so just using a service and content provider can sometimes like mix between the two, but for the most part that's how they classify everything. And then that's pretty much it. We're running a little low on time. Maybe we could still show it.
Yeah, we can still show some code bits. So
yeah, well,
yes.
Just go ahead.
Yeah, we got a question from the street.
So we have a stream question. Do variables have to be camel case or be in like have the same rules as Java when it comes to variables?
Most of the same rules as Java.
So those aren't like rules. Those are
kind of coding conventions.
Yeah, coding conventions basically. You don't have to have camel case in Java, but it's highly recommended. And the same applies for Kotlin as well.
Okay, so I know we had one question about ranges, so I will show that real quick. At least to start this off. But this is an example of how you can take a range of an x and a y and actually like add to it dynamically. So we can say for any a in 1 through b plus 1. So this works as a function that I made. So a and b are your parameters. And it will simply, this is an example of Kotlin conciseness, where you can just say, once again, your if statement, and just throw the print right after that, and it will accept that. So we'll say, oh, if A is in this amount, it'll print if it's in range. So in this case, I'm pulling A at B, as in X is my A, and 9 is my B. So we're gonna say from 1 through 9 plus 1, so 10. And if A, e 10, exists in anywhere between 1 and 10, it's gonna print just fits in range. So that's one example of a range, because in this case it's gonna go through 1 through whatever the variable is plus 1 that it's given to from B. Here's kind of another thing where it makes a list. So like a list of A, B, C. You're basically gonna say, oh, if -1 is not in the list, it's out of range. If -1 is not in the list, from 0 to whatever your list is, it's out of range. And then you could also do it for like size. So you can say, oh, the size is valid. What do you call it? Out of range too. It's a way to check like ranges for like arrays and something. Anything with indices, you can check that and have it like accept that. This is an example of iterating over range. This is more of a simple example. 1 to 5, so if A is in 1 to 5, print A. But here's an example of steps, which is a specific question we had. So we could iterate over a progression. So we can say, print A 1 to 10, but skip every 2. So it's going to print 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, I believe. And then this one is an example of counting down. So it's a little more complicated in the sense you have to literally tell it just down, step down. But it's same format. So if A is in 9, stepping down to 0, and stepping every 3 steps. So it's going to print 9, 6, 3, 0 in that case. So that's your step in, step out example. I have a pretty black and white example of Kotlin conciseness. So this is a standard kind of like a sum function. Sum 1 and sum 2 are the exact same functionality. But this is like a standard function kind of setup. So you say, sum 1, A, B, you're declaring it as a type non-nullable. You're just saying return A plus B. But in Kotlin, you can do things with functions and make it really concise, single line, and just say, okay, the declaration's the same, but you can just say equals A plus B and it works. Oh yeah, because we got everything up. Does anybody else have any specific questions they want to see an example of? This is cloned on the repo that we put a link to. I'm going to update it later. Mainly I'm just missing strings and a few other things. There is an example of strings, but a more complete example of strings is one I want to upload. So all this will be on later, and we will be for questioning, but just because reservation time's ending up, so we got to start cleaning up. But I will be here to answer questions, and both me and Leon, Leon are on the Slack, and you can ask us questions there. Email us to the ACM. Anything else, that is all kosher. Like I said, the repo is there now. I will let you guys know when it is updated to include strings and other stuff. So,
How do I just log out?
Yeah. Well,
I noticed that the stream